Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I would like to point out that the British Sign Language interpretation of proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. Now we start with questions to Prime Minister Gareth Davis.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the whole House will have read the statement today from my honourable friend, the member for Bridgend. And I know that the House stands with you and will give you the support that you need to live freely as yourself. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank Donna Ockenden and her whole team for the compassionate approach she's taken throughout this distressing review of maternity care at Shrewsbury and Telford Hospitals NHS Trust. Every woman giving birth has the right to a safe birth, and my heart, therefore, goes out to the families for the distress and suffering that they've endured. My right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health, will be making an oral statement this afternoon setting out the government's response. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While our focus is rightly on Ukraine, the Prime Minister will be aware of the great concern many people have across the Baltic states. So can he outline the role the Joint Expeditionary Force can play in countering Russian aggression and improving defensive posture for our allies in the Baltics?
Prime Minister.
I thank him very much, and the Joint Expeditionary Force, or the JEF, is an increasingly important grouping of the Nordic countries, the Baltic countries, the Dutch and ourselves, who are committed to working together in an active way to counter Russian aggression and to support our Ukrainian friends. And we had a very successful meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we'll have further such meetings in the course of the next few weeks.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by joining the Prime Minister in his remarks in relation to the honourable member for Bridgend? Does the Prime Minister still think that he and the Chancellor are tax-cutting Conservatives?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I certainly do, because I certainly do, because this is the government that has just introduced not only the biggest cut in fuel duty ever, but the biggest cut in tax for working people in the last 10 years, Mr. Speaker. 70% of the population paying national insurance contribution will have a substantial tax cut as a result of what the Chancellor did. And if you take together, they don't like it, Mr. Speaker. It's true. They always put up taxes. That's why. We cut taxes. They love it. They love putting up taxes. But if you take together what we're doing with income tax and national insurance, it's the biggest tax cut proposed by my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, for 25 years.
Keir Starmer.
Cut the nonsense and treat the British people with a bit of respect. Let me take him through this slowly. 15 tax rises, the highest tax burden for 70 years. For every £6 they're taking in tax rises, they're only handing £1 back. Prime Minister, is that cutting taxes or is that raising taxes?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't know where he's been for the last 2 years, but even by the standards of yes, he has. Even by the standards of Captain Hindsight, Mr. Speaker, to obliterate the biggest pandemic for the last century from his memory, to obliterate the $408 billion that we've had to spend to look after people up and down the country is quite extraordinary. And this is a government that is getting on with reducing the tax burden wherever we can. What we are doing, Mr. Speaker, there's one measure I think he should be supporting, and that's the health and care levy, Mr. Speaker, to fund our NHS. That's the one they oppose, Mr. Speaker. Every other tax rise, they're all in favour of.
Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I can only hope that his police questionnaire was a bit more convincing than that. This year, British people face the worst fall in living standards on record. While they're counting every penny, the Prime Minister is hitting them with higher taxes. But in 2024, when there just so happens to be a general election, they will introduce a small tax cut. That's not taking difficult decisions. It's putting the Tory re-election campaign over and above helping people pay their bills. How did he find a Chancellor as utterly cynical as he is?
Prime Minister.
What we have, Mr. Speaker, is a Chancellor who took the tough decisions to look after the UK economy throughout the pandemic, who protected people up and down the land with £408 billion worth of support, Mr. Speaker. And by the way, if we listen to them, if we listen to Captain, this is the truth. If we listen to Captain Hindsight, we would not have come out of lockdown in July last year, Mr. Speaker. We would have stayed in lockdown over Christmas and New Year, Mr. Speaker, with the result that the UK economy would not be growing in the way that it is, and so we would not be able to make the investments that we now are. And under Labour, we would have to tax more and borrow more, and they cannot be trusted, Mr. Speaker, with the economy.
Keir Starmer.
The tough decisions. Give me a break. We know, Mr. Speaker, we know who those two always ask to pay. Income stealth tax, a tax on working people. Tuition fee raid, a tax on working people. National insurance hike, a tax on working people. All while oil and gas companies see unexpected bumper profits. A windfall tax would raise billions and ease the burden on working people. Mr. Speaker, the former CEO of BP, Lord John Brown, says a windfall tax is justifiable. The current CEO says they have, in his words, more cash than they know what to do with. Why is the Prime Minister more interested in shielding oil and gas profits than supporting working people?
Mr. Speaker, it's a classic example of what Labour has got wrong in their period in office. The oil and gas companies are now investing £20 billion, Mr. Speaker, in ensuring that we have long-term energy supplies. And I remember the 1997 Labour manifesto actually said that there was no economic case for more nuclear power. We are now having to make good the historic mistakes of the Labour Party by investing in our long-term energy supply. That is what we are doing. Everything that they are proposing would mean deterring investment, meaning higher prices for consumers and households up and down the land being worse off.
Keir Starmer.
Speaker, there we have it. They're the party of excess oil and gas profits. We're the party of working people. Mr. Speaker, talking of parties, Prime Minister, he told the House no rules were broken in Downing Street during lockdown. The police have now concluded there was widespread criminality. The Ministerial Code says that ministers who knowingly mislead the House should resign. Why is he still here?
Hang on a minute. He's just changed his position. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I mean, we do at least expect some consistency from this human weather vane. It was only a week or so ago where he was saying that I shouldn't resign. He's got to make what is his position, Mr. Speaker? The investigators must get on with their job. But in the meantime, In the meantime, Mr. Speaker, we are going to get on with our job. And what we are focusing on is tackling the cost of living, helping people through the spike in fuel prices, the 9.1 billion that the Chancellor has set out. But also, Mr. Speaker, doing the long. I've mentioned nuclear power. I've mentioned tackling our energy supplies, which Labour totally failed to deal with. What we're also doing, far more important perhaps even than that, Mr. Speaker, we're tackling illiteracy and innumeracy in our schools. And I think we're investing billions in tutoring, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're focusing on, and I think that's what the people of this country want us to focus on.
Keir Starmer.
Look, there are only two possible explanations. Either he's trashing the ministerial code, or he's claiming he was repeatedly lied to by his own advisers and that he didn't know what was going on in his own house and his own office. Come off it. He really does think that it's one rule for him and another rule for everyone else. That he can pass off criminality in his office and ask others to follow the law. That he can keep raising taxes and call himself a tax cutter. That he can hike tax during a cost of living crisis and get credit for giving a bit back just before an election. When is he going to stop taking the British public for fools?
Mr. Speaker, this is the leader of the opposition who would have kept this country in lockdown and made it absolutely impossible. He has zero consistency on any issue, Mr. Speaker. But one thing we know about is he would like to take us back into the EU and take us back into lockdown if he possibly could. Thanks to what this government has done, we have unemployment back down to the levels it was before the pandemic. The economy bigger than it was. We have record vacancies, Mr. Speaker. The difference between them and us is they want to keep people, Mr. Speaker, they want to keep people on benefits. We want to help people into work. And that's what we're doing in record numbers. They want to raise taxes. We want to cut taxes. And that's what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. And we're tackling illiteracy. They didn't give a damn, Mr. Speaker. We're getting on with making this country the best place to invest. Last time I updated the House, Mr. Speaker, on the number of unicorns that we had of unicorns in this country. That's tech countries worth more than $1 billion, Mr. Speaker. I said we had 100. I can inform you now, Mr. Speaker, that we now have 120. They don't want to hear it, but let me tell you, that's more than France, that's more than Germany, that's more than Israel, it's more than France, Germany, Israel combined, Mr. Speaker. That's what's happening under this government. That's what's happening because of the tough decisions we've taken. We take the tough decisions, we deliver, they play politics, Mr. Speaker.